One of the saddest things I see today is when I look around and I watch young people. I see them in public areas, and I see that their heads are down and they're looking at their cell phones and their smartphones and scrolling through it. And I'm talking about young people that are only, preteen, teenage, maybe even younger. And I try to compare them, and I try to think back to what it was like in our day, people of our age, and how we didn't have smartphones, and how happy and how lucky I consider myself to be to not have been raised in some ways in that time period, and how glad I am that we didn't have smartphones when I was young. Overall, happy childhood. And today I'd like to talk a little bit more about that, about what this generation, the younger generation, doesn't have compared to what we had. We had it good in some ways, and as I said, or I meant to say, I'm speaking in generalities here. Some of us may have been raised in a very poor home, and so I'm speaking to people generally who are our age that would remember those times when we were young and what those times were like, how we were on our bikes and we went out and explored and had adventure, how we went out in the woods behind our house and climbed trees, and we just had fun, hide and seek. And sure, there was bad things that happened back then, and like I said, every generation has problems and things that do happen. What I'm talking about here is not generational bashing. I don't believe in that. I think that every generation has good points and bad points, although I do find it very, very sad to see and to watch younger people, which to me, they seem so sad with their heads bowed down, and they're all caught up in this world of technology that in some ways is not real for the most part. And I understand technology increases, it's far different than it was. We've gone from the old telephone party line hanging on the wall to the family gathering around the radio to listen to shows. We've gone from that through to the VHS to the CD-ROM, and we've gone from records, LPs, and even though they're back in again. And we had Walkmans, Sony Walkmans, and that sort of thing. So hi, my name is Kevin. I'm from Silver Hill, and today I would like to talk about how good we had it, and also how that has affected who we are, and that we can be proud of who we are and the benefits. And my name is Kevin. This is Silver Hill. This is for people mostly about 55 and up, but you're always welcome to listen if you're younger. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, they were different times when I was growing up than we have today. I realize that young people today have much, in some ways, more stress. It is true that there were mental stresses and mental health issues going through high school, even when I was going through in the 70s and going to school. And there were stressful times as well. There were times when it was hard to deal with your classmates, and in some ways it was rougher. There were bullies. There were a lot of physical bullies. They took advantage of you when you were in sports classes and that sort of thing. We used to have a game called Murder Ball, and they would, there'd be a guy there, man, he had arms as long as some kind of orangutan or something. He would drive that thing, and if it ever hit you, would just like in the shoulder or something, you try to avoid it, man, it would burn and sting. So I don't know, maybe there were people bullied, and school wasn't always that fun. But I'm remembering back family times, younger, and how the smartphone and technology didn't really take over our lives. If we had a TV show that we were looking forward to, I can remember a few. If you can remember a few, please leave them in the comments, some of your favorite ones. For me, we would see, and it was usually a family thing, if dad was home and mom, which they usually were in the evening, the type of work my parents had. And my mom was mostly a homemaker, for us, but she did work. And back in those days, I understand, one income could get you a basic shelter. And if someone else went out to work, you had the extra for maybe a car and a TV and that sort of thing. Today, it's much tougher. I understand that in some ways. And like, you can't really do too much just on a high school diploma, but if you've got a keen business sense, maybe you can. But yeah, comparing those days to what we see now and how everyone is so connected online, and in some ways I look back and I wonder, would I have wanted to have grown up in a time like today where I was constantly checking something like that? Back then, your mind was allowed to sort of roam free in the same way as a kid you could go after school, and even some in the summertime, there'd be enough light to go out and hang around and do things in your community, in the neighborhood. So you could go biking, you could just busy and stuff like that. We had chores, and my dad was like, we burned wood and that sort of stuff as a side issue. I just wood, nothing else. And yeah, so that meant that there were Saturdays and there was a lot of times, and my dad was into fixing he was trying to always keep a car on the road. And so I remember, so many times him saying, hold the light, because it would be getting dark and we'd be putting an alternator on or something. And he always wanted to spot a light right on then. It was like, hold the light. Yeah, he was a little bit agitating that way, but that's the way it was. He was a good dad, and Mom was good, and they were good to us, and we got what we wanted and what we needed. And they worked hard, for what they had. So I just remember it being a much funner time. I remember shows like, whether it was the A-Team or the original Battlestar Galactica, those aren't the only show. There was a lot of sitcoms, and we were watching those shows. But even the more serious shows, like a little bit later on, maybe Knight Rider with Kit and the Duke Boys, Dukes of Hazzard and stuff. It wasn't all about politics then. Like, it wasn't. If you had the, things that might today. I won't get into details, but today, clearly, as we get more globally aware, yeah, there was, logos and things that probably weren't appropriate and were offensive to different cultures, and that wasn't good. But I do remember that things weren't all political. I do remember that, almost as I was talking with my wife, it's like pretty much every TV show, it had some way of resolving itself. There was a sort of a happy resolution toward, the end of the show. And if it was a cliffhanger, it would be resolved the next time you saw it. And movies themselves, you look at when Star Wars came out in 1977, they boasted about things, and maybe even the Battlestar Galactica movie, they boasted about how long these, 2.5 years in the making, and it's like, wow, this must be great, Today they're snapping out movies, and with AI and a lot of CGI, and they're just, movies are being pumped. And yeah, there's advantages, and like I said, I don't want this to be a generational bashing thing, but I'm really glad. Think of it. If you're my age, you're somewhere between 55, 65 and up, we're the last ones to live where we were alive on this planet that experienced a time before technology invaded every corner of your mind and of your life, and we were free, as I said, to go climb trees, to ride our bikes, and today, yeah, it's a lot better. Today they emphasize having helmets, and we did crazy things on our bikes, and I remember climbing trees when I was young, to the point where it was, you're at the very top of that tree, and I'm not exaggerating, it would be swaying to the point where a little bit more weight or swerve and it probably would have broke off the top branch. But you really got a sense. The one thing that you did get as a younger person is a sense of balance, of weight, and just how far things, just how much weight would that branch. You could look at a branch or a tree and you could know if it could support you. I doubt that many young people today could do that. I doubt that many young people today even look up and see a tree, because, and I get it, it's addictive, and you want to know what your friends are doing, and and maybe how popular you are today, and it is addictive to get those notifications. And I'm not here advocating for no technology, because as you know, without that technology, a lot of us, well, I've had a couple major surgeries and procedures, and just hearing a woodpecker back there. Without technology going on, we're better off with it. But a lot of what's going on with the smartphones and the connection that everyone has to the world, and the world is, I think, more in trouble than it used to be. But I don't want to get into that so much. But I know, in our day, there were planes being hijacked. There was terrible accidents. You'd see them on the news. But the news was usually at 6 o'clock for half an hour. Or if you're up late enough, it was at 10 o'clock, and maybe your dad was watching it. But it wasn't all the time. It wasn't a constant feed of destruction. And, it was a great time that way to be alive. Now, I do know, as we get older, and you know too, we tend to glamorize the good parts and forget the bad parts. There were some bad parts. This is not one of them. Our generation was taught to work with our hands. I spent many, we didn't really get to see too many of the Saturday morning cartoon thing, because although we did, my brother and I, he's a bit younger than me, especially for myself being the oldest one, I was often roped into going early out to get firewood, help Dad cut wood in the springtime, and we'd cut it and we'd go places, and sometimes they'd have sales on it and we'd take the truck and load it up. He had this old GMC half-ton, I can't remember what it was. And different trucks, of course. He had a Ford at a different time. Yeah, I'm on a tangent. But those memories of getting up really, really early before dawn, even though it made you feel awful as a kid, it somehow feels like it just initiated you into a world where you were at one with nature, and you felt feelings. Things feel like, I remember we go on fishing trips or just nature hikes or working in the woods, and once my dad, we had a can of sardines, and he made a fire, and we had some cheese, and he actually, something I could actually take back then. I remember him taking the can, and I don't know what he used to keep from burning himself, but he put the sardine can, after we had eaten the cans, there was still oil in it. He put the can right on the fire, and he put some cheese in it, and it melted. And you're out in nature, and my God, man, there's just nothing like it. There's nothing. But there was no phone, there was no Wi-Fi, there was no hookup. It was just your imagination, and you could go in the woods on your own. Given you knew the area and your parents. Mom and Dad wasn't always over you. And again, I'm not judging people that I know things could be different today. Letting your children go roam free wherever they want to. I'm not sure if you can do that today. But I know back then, for the most part, we were allowed to do it. We were allowed to watch our favorite. I remember when I was younger, seeing like Star Trek on. It would be on the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation or TV channel. And it was about 12 at noon, and I always tried to catch that, and on the old TV. And it was just, it wasn't even cable. It was just it was all static. And later in life, I'm amazed to see this show on Blu-ray, and the color, wow. But we'd get caught up in all the adventure. And I remember even going outside and trying to take pieces of wood and make a toy phaser gun, and all this stuff. And we were allowed to play guns. We were allowed to to go out. I remember sometimes in the winter, the snow being so high, it went right up the telephone poles. And I mean, we had sense not to go up and touch wires or anything, especially if it was a power line. But I remember snow being so deep that, and all the kids in the community would come out, and we had like plastic guns or sticks or whatever, and we'd just be, one team would be on one side of the hill and the other team on the other side, and it was snowing, it was after dark, and we would just rush down the hill and meet, like this would be like a road that wasn't being used at the time, and oh, the crazy stuff. I mean, I still have this vivid memory of driving my bike. We didn't have helmets back. We didn't care about helmets. We should have, and you should wear your helmet today. But I remember just whizzing along on this bike, and it had like, what is it, the sissy bar or something in the back? And anyways, and it had the long handlebars in the front. Sissy bar, and I can't remember what the name of the... But anyways, I remember one time we're just racing along, and I went down on a ditch. I hit a rock, and I went down the ditch. Of course, the front wheel just stuck, and when it stuck, the whole thing flipped right over. And this high bar in the back acted like a roll bar, and the thing was just vertical, upside down, and I was upside down, and I didn't get hurt. But we did get hurt quite a bit back then. We did get, bee stings, and it just, we rubbed up against nature in a different way. And it was a different time. And I remember coming home at night, maybe helping Dad with the wood during the day, or he had all kinds of different chores. There was always chores to do. My God, there was chores. Like some of these things now, they almost seem like they would be illegal. When my dad would come home, he worked at a shipyard and operated cranes and machinery and that sort of thing. He was really good at that sort of thing. And I can remember coming home, and in the wintertime, he'd have these insoles in his boots. And it was my job to take his insoles out and put them on the dryer so they would dry, like on the vents on the floor. And I think that would be probably against some labor laws today. But, just the whole idea that you were there to help your parents, and your parents did what they could for you. And, you became the TV remote. All this stuff that I don't think kids would put up with today. But anyways, it makes you a different person. I can remember coming home and on Saturdays, and my mom would make the best homemade pizza. I mean, it was great. And especially when you've been outside all day. And we would watch, I think now it was Saturdays, we would watch Bugs Bunny, the Roadrunner Hour. I think it was around 6 o'clock. And one of my other favorite shows was, I know, it's really campy, goofy stuff like Space 1999, that's what it was called. And you'd have these really cool spaceships and stuff, like Eagles, they called them. But every show, like I said, there was this overall sense of positivity in the world. Maybe we were living in a bubble back then. It's true. I'm filming this kind of late here, so you're going to get all this sun stuff here, and my hair is blinding you probably. But anyway, those were wonderful times, and I have wonderful times as growing up. So people our age, again, not knocking younger people. They have their talents, their abilities. They're our hope for the next generation, for the future. And there's some great, if you're older, if you're like my age and older, look at the qualities of some of these young people. Don't put everybody, we don't want them saying, oh, you're just an old fart. You're just like all the rest of them. You're not open-minded. You're stuck in your old, whatever, racist or whatever ideas, which I am not racist. And, damn, they say if you say that, you are, but, it was on a different topic. It was more open, I think, in families back in the day. I'm not sure. But anyway, no, but yeah, we don't want them judging us, and we shouldn't judge everyone as if they're all the same, like they're all one bad apple spoils the whole barrel, but not necessarily so. We don't want to be treated that way, so I don't want to treat young people that way. I love young people. I think they're great, smart. It's energizing to be around them, and it's kind of a shame that as you get older, sometimes it's like you get put out to pasture, kind of like, you don't really know what you're talking about, old man or old woman. And it's like, no, we may not know some of the things that you know, but we have had a special experience. And I'm very, very proud that I was born in a time when I could experience this fun. There was more of a sense of community. We did, as we got older, I remember my parents got quite involved in a church, and I am not advocating for any religion here, but there was your family and your community back then. And maybe it was because jobs could be all in the same area. Today, like my wife and I were just saying, you could have one of your children. We've got 3. We could have, just one day say, hey, guess what? I'm going to Japan or whatever, because that's the way things are. But it seemed like, and although my brother, he did move away to another country when he got out of high school, but it kind of seemed like as you were growing up, and I mean the preteen years, that most of your family was somewhere within driving distance at least. This may not be true, but there seemed to be more of a sense of community, and that your family, your extended family, was more a part of your life. And one thing I noticed, it may not be true of yourself, but I have noticed in your situation, but I have noticed that when I think of all my nephews and nieces, like if I don't make myself present, I mean, I'm not saying they don't live right around the area that I live in, but it's kind of like they're not going to get around to visiting you until it's your funeral. And it's kind of a shame, really, because when I grew up, it was different that way. It was like we were all in one big unit, and we'd see each other, and like my wife's dad would, at Christmas morning, he'd go up and he'd go up and visit, his wife's mom in her apartment, and then he'd bring her down to their house, and then he'd go get the other side, and it's like everybody got brought together as a family. And I know, there was, I don't want to put too much icing on the cake here, because sometimes it's hard. Like thinking about technology, like in some ways I do like texting, the concept of texting, because sometimes the generation we grew up with, like our parents, like my mom would phone her sister, and they would talk for a long, long time, and then my mom would phone her other sister, and they would talk and say the same thing, and it was like, oh my, you're spending all day on the telephone talking. It's like, geez. But and texting is just like, you want to know something, like, Harold's in the hospital. You just text it, and okay, which one is it? What, what's his problem, and whatever, and it's done. It didn't take you an hour. So yeah, there were things like that. But overall, there was this sense of community. There was a freedom. We had a freedom that kids don't experience today. We had, I think, overall more happiness as children. Generally speaking, there was things, people in our lives that were narcissists, manipulators, and that was tough. It was tough dealing with those kinds of people. And hopefully you never had any physical abusers in your life, but they existed back then too. But anyways, yeah, I think just to sum up this video before it gets on too long, I am starting to remember a lot of things in my childhood, and hopefully you are too, and it's giving you some good memories. And yeah, I am just so happy that we weren't raised where we were always connected and always on our phones. We had the whole path behind us, right? We had adventures, places to explore and things to do. And we grew up, for the most part, what they call Generation X and Boomers. I'm right on that line. And that's another thing I hear. I'll always hear things like, oh, the boomers had all this and all that, and anybody that's 60 and up, they got it easy because they had great. It wasn't everybody. Trust me. It wasn't everybody. My parents grew up in a mobile home. They had 3 mobile homes. Each one got a little bigger as they traded one out for another. We did build a house, as I said in another video. We built a house, but I helped with the labor. I did at 50% of it. I helped Dad cut the wood in the woods, actually, on some of the land that he had, and we hauled that wood down, and we had it milled by a friend. Yes, you see, there was more community and connection, and so cost could be sort of mitigated that way, everybody got paid, but it's kind of, you helped each other out. I had an uncle who was an electrician. He wired the house, for example. Anyways, I'm starting to ramble again, but just know this, that if you're like me and you were raised during this time, and you feel sometimes, you probably do feel a little sad, for like I do, when I see these people, these young people, they're just all on the phone. I mean, we used to go, on a Sunday afternoon or Saturday, one of my aunts, she lived near the ocean, and there was a nice beach there, and we'd go out. We're just kids, and we had goggles and snorkels and flippers, and oh man, I can remember looking down and seeing crabs walking along. I'm not making this up. I remember seeing, be snorkeling, and I'd see all these crabs. One time I was swimming, and just because it wasn't that much light, but all of a sudden this whole silver wall went right by me, and what it was these baby herring just going by. We were outside, and it was great. So anyway, yeah, if you're like me and you grew up in that, I think we became hard workers. I think we are the type of people that tend to be overall generally loyal, and we lived in a fun time. Things were fun. I mean, they were tough times. People still got sick and died back then, and stuff like that. And there were sad stories, very sad stories. But overall, I am glad that I got to grow up and I got to experience what it was like to just go ride my bike, take adventures, not be tied to a phone, not be chit-chatting back and forth about what so-and-so's doing, or, man, we didn't even have stuff like sexting and stuff like that. We didn't even have to worry about that stuff. And that's just awful, and I understand it's hard for young people today. It's terrible hard. I wish somehow they could just experience the life that we had growing up, that freedom, the ability to go outside, to see the sky, to camp at night, and, just experience those things. And, I'm not a professional scientist or doctor or anything, but I can imagine if your head is hanging down all the time, that is your sorrow position, right? That's your sad position. And I would venture to guess that if there's any happy endorphins to be had, they're going to be from standing up straight, from holding your head up high, and walking and seeing the world around you. Because as much as we want to forget it, as the generations move on and get faster, more AI, and we want to just think that the brain is separate from the body, it isn't. We're creatures of this earth, like other creatures, and we need to stay in touch with that, because it's the earth. Right now, it's the earth. It's not Mars. I'm sorry, Elon, but it's the earth that's keeping us alive and giving us what we need. So, a different story for a different time. But anyways, I just want to say, if you feel down about yourself, if you feel like, geez, I'm old and I don't have anything to share, and I'm just not, I can't think of the word right now. I'm just not seen as having any sense of worth or something. You do. Tell your story. Tell your story to yourself even. And remember that we're of a special breed. We lived during a time before it all. We saw it all happening. We saw I mean, I was alive when man walked on the moon. I was alive when there was a first space shuttle. You know, all those things. You know, and we went from, yeah, LPs to Sony Walkmans to DVDs, the whole thing. We've seen a lot. And we've got a lot to share. And in the end of the day, we can kind of smile inside of ourselves and say, yeah, I'm happy that I lived during this time period. And I had the child that I had. What do you think? I'm going to end it here. What do you guys think? Have you had similar experiences? Got any memories? Just please, you know, don't get too personal, leave too much personal data on here, but just, you know, in general, jot down in the comments, and like and subscribe if I'm being any help to you. I'm still working on this. Sometimes the camera's a little shaky, and I'm trying to work this out because, hey, I'm keeping up with technology, which we should, but I am not that good. But I'm learning, and I can do a lot of stuff. So you guys have a good one, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourself. Be proud of yourself. Be glad you had a shot at it, and you still do. Glad to be alive. Talk to you next time. See ya. Have a good one.